Chapter 21. Armed 1. It broke and went through. The frame broke. The power that burst it surged as it found an exit. It was a swift current. It was an eruption that he felt for the first time in his life. He screamed. No, it wasn't like a scream. It was something else. A spirit's cry. A swift flame that swallowed everything. He couldn't tell the time. But moments later, he opened his eyes. Green flames rose out and naturally died down. Yong-ho didn't stumble. He stood up straight and felt himself change. The amount of mana he could hold increased. Even if he didn't circulate, he could definitely feel it. He knew he didn't have any energy. It was like an empty bowl since he used up all of his mana. Because of that, he definitely felt it. Catalina. Yong-ho spoke. In front of him, Catalina was sitting on the floor, and like someone that regained their consciousness, she quickly stood up. She saw Yong-ho and her confused face turned into a face filled with joy. Master, your horn. Yong-ho raised his hand. Even without a mirror, he knew where the horn grew. The horn collects all the mana that exists within this world, and it was like a transmitter that helped him concentrate. 2 horns grew out in the same spot as Catalina. Before, they looked like nothing more than small rocks, but now it was larger and thicker. Now they looked like actual horns. The spirit of the dungeon spoke, as if they were waiting for this moment. The dungeon's daily production volume has been increased from 50 to 80. Master's maximum amount of mana has been increased from 180 to 280. And thanks to the horns, the mana recovery rate has been increased to 100. A demon house is made up of mana. The body and the soul is one lump of mana. He was able to experience it. He couldn't really feel the mana since he was half human and half demon, but now it felt like he had been reborn again. Yong-ho smiled. He was tired from using up his mana, but he even enjoyed that exhaustion. Catalina, how's your body? Yong-ho asked in his usual tone, and Catalina's shoulders dropped as she let out a sigh of relief. The master had horns. His mana definitely got stronger, but she was worried. Even though she only served him for a couple of days, she wasn't sure whether he was the owner that she knew of. Maybe he changed somewhere, but he remained the same. Maybe it's because her worries vanished, but tears were seen in her eyes and felt Yong-ho looking at her. Her clothes got messed up because of the slimes. She didn't really get hurt because Yong-ho acted so quickly, but on parts where her skin was exposed, there were minor injuries. It'll heal if I use my saliva. Catalina answered while stuttering, and Yong-ho smiled again. Catalina blushed because of her answer, and instead of making fun of her for it, he spoke with a cheerful voice. Let's go back. We have to reorganize. Yes, sir, Skull. Skull intercepted after hearing Catalina answer quickly. Before leaving, Yong-ho looked back. Beyond the inactive rooms, there was a gold mine that Kaiwan found. I will find it. Yong-ho turned around and started walking. Master. When they returned, Eligor was the first one to greet them. He was shocked by how messy both Yong-ho and Catalina looked, that he was flailing. But when he noticed Yong-ho's horns, he flailed even more. First, Yong-ho moved to the only furniture that was in the room, which was the throne. He spoke when he sat down on the hard stone. I found the gold mine. The horns appeared because I used the power of evolution on myself. Eligor didn't understand at first. When Catalina brought the kettle filled with water, his eyes widened and asked, The gold mine, sir. The one that belonged to Kaiwan. That's right. Like you pointed out, dungeon monsters were all over that place. It was in the shape of a large ant. I think they made that place their home. Eligor's expression turned serious after hearing Yong-ho's answer. It was a reaction he expected. The crazy ant colony was located not too far from here. It was a major threat when it came to expanding the dungeon and maintaining it. Yong-ho spoke calmly. First, we'll use the gear that's in Kaiwan's armory. In order to take back the gold mine, we need to strengthen our attack. He wasn't planning on avoiding them by crouching like the previous owners did. He was going to reclaim it. Hell, take back what belonged to the House of Mammon. Yong-ho was going to make it his. I understand. But first, it will be best to take a break. I've created a new bedroom for you. Bedroom. He wasn't expecting it, so Yong-ho was the one that was surprised this time. Eligor answered with a calm expression. It's not much, but I've obtained a small room. I'll make sure to fill it with furniture soon. He was a demon king, and the owner of the dungeon too, so sleeping on top of the carpet was something he didn't want to show the spirits anymore. A bedroom was a necessary facility so that it could help him protect his dignity. "I'll take you to the bedroom." "Oh, okay." It felt like he was being tricked, but Yong-ho decided to follow honestly. Since he used up a lot of his mana, he wanted to sleep really badly. "Rest, Catalina." "You too, Skull." "Yes, Master Skullo," Catalina answered right away, and Skull, who was lying on the floor, answered as well. Yong-ho and Eligor headed towards the bedroom. When he closed and opened his eyes, time had already passed. It was like a warp. No, time machine. He felt the same thing when he was a student. His throat was dry, so he couldn't really speak. However, his head was perfectly fine. Because of the horns, his mana level was full. How long was I out? Yong-ho sat up. The ceiling was low, and the room was smaller than before. He was sitting on top of a pile of hay instead of on the carpet. It was the incomplete room that Eligor made in a hurry. Yong-ho stood up after remembering what happened. Eligor placed a basin filled with water, and he used that to wash his face. Afterwards, he put on his cape and walked out of the room. It's still the same. It seemed like he didn't sleep for that long. Inside the demon's room, most of the spirits that were in the dungeon were gathered here. The hard-working goblins were lying side by side on top of the carpet that was near the entrance, and Skull was on the ground as usual. Honestly, Skull could lie down anywhere within the dungeon, and it wouldn't be odd. As usual, Catalina was within the throne's vicinity and was lying on the ground with her cape wrapped around her. She looked like a silkworm, and he pitied her for some reason. This is not good. Yong-ho felt that he was responsible for this, so he quietly walked out so that they could continue sleeping. He drank water to cure his dry throat, and when he left the room, he saw Eligor watering Trent. "You're a tree after all." "Oh, Master, you're awake. You're up early." "Yeah. Since we found the road that leads to the armory, we should hurry." "That's very like you, sir." Next to the smiling Eligor, Trent bent forward and expressed their manners to Yong-ho. Now that he thought of it, he never gave Trent a name. Should I just call them Ant? Yong-ho always pushed for simplicity, but he thought Ant wasn't good enough. Let me think about it more. He wasn't in a rush to name them. There was something else that needed to be taken care of as soon as possible. "Eligor, can we make a room for the spirits as well? I think Catalina will need her own room as well." Yong-ho has been sleeping on the top of the carpet until yesterday, but he thought this wasn't good. Even if it was a dungeon, providing basic food and shelter was the right thing to do. Eligor quickly answered to Yong-ho's owner-like command. "It's possible. Thanks to you, the dungeon's daily production volume has increased. I'll create a dorm for the ordinary spirits. I'll leave it up to you." Yong-ho stopped talking and started thinking. He looked towards the passageway that connected to the prison and asked, "How are things with the kobolds?" "The torture chamber is still in progress," Eligor answered with disappointment. Yong-ho tilted his head. "None of them are willing to work for us. During the day that they attacked, it didn't seem like they were very loyal towards their previous owner. All four of them seem like that, but we can't trust them without torturing them." Instead of answering, Yong-ho observed Eligor. He scratched the back of his head and spoke. "I'm sure there's one that's better than the others. After breakfast, pick one before I leave. Are you thinking about taking them with you? The more power, the better." Yong-ho didn't expect them to be completely loyal. Right now, he needed soldiers he could use. He wasn't going to use them as a shield, but he might use them for something similar. Anyways, Catalina and Skull were more important than the kobold. Eligor must have read this mind, because he agreed to do it with a serious expression. And right after breakfast, along with Skull and Catalina, John and a kobold were wielding bamboo spears, and they followed Yong-ho to search the dungeon. Their target was the room that was located up north, the armory that belonged to Kaiwan Armed One End. Chapter 22. Armed 2. Since they've already walked down the path that led to the gold mine, it was easy. There were only 2 grunge slimes, because they've already cleaned this area. "Great, we haven't been to this area before. Everyone keep your guard up." John's eyes widened as he tightened his grip on the bamboo spear. The kobold that was in front of him did the same. Catalina closed the distance between her and Yong-ho, and Skull stretched out his shoulders. Yong-ho continued talking. "Kobold will be the advance guard. John and Skull take care of the sides. Catalina and I will be in the center, and support Skull, and John moved the sides. Kobold flinched when Young-ho told them that they would be the advance guard and expressed that they didn't want to. But when Young-ho and Catalina glared at them, they walked towards the front of the group. After organizing the group, he continued searching by going to the right of the door that led to the gold mine. While walking through 5 rooms in a row, they didn't encounter any dungeon monsters. Kobold and John must have felt relieved because they seemed more laid back. Young-ho opened the dungeon map in the air. He nodded his head. Are the crazy ants and the slimes just in the gold mine? If that was the case, then it's understandable why those dungeon monsters weren't here. But if they keep walking, they'll reach the armory. Seeing as how there weren't any dungeon monsters here, there's a high chance that there weren't a lot of monsters here, like the crazy ants and slimes master. Catalina carefully called out when Young-ho stopped and stared at the map. Instead of answering, he looked forward. He slightly closed his eyes and answered, "I'm sure. I can sense something from this direction too." Greed was reacting stronger than the gold mine and started wanting the new target forward. It wasn't that far. They walked through another room. And Young-ho had a hunch. He raised his hand and stopped all the spirits. Wait for a moment, it might be the next room. Kobold and John knew exactly what Young-ho was talking about. They were no longer relaxed and kept their guard up. Catalina looked at Young-ho without saying anything. Young-ho and Catalina's eyes met for a moment, and after tightening his grip on Amon, he walked towards the wall. After waiting with the spirits right beside the door, he commanded Kobold to open the door. The kobold was sweating and was hesitant, but John was poking them with the bamboo spear, so they didn't have any choice. With slightly red eyes, they looked at the door and quickly moved to open the door. The room has been activated. Right after the kobold opened the door, the spirit of the dungeon provided mana into the inactive room. The light made the darkness disappear, and moments later, Young-ho looked at Catalina. When there wasn't any reaction regarding the room, Catalina pulled down the hood, and after she pricked up her ears, she nodded. Young-ho waited for Catalina to wear her hood again and open the door completely. He entered the room along with Skull and John. Unlike the other rooms, this room was pretty big. The area was 3 times larger than ordinary room, and the length of the room was long. A large iron door was attached at the end of the room. The armory's door is the same as the recorded description. Catalina spoke as she looked at the door that had the shape of a wolf devouring the moon. The spirit of the dungeon spoke as well. I can feel a strong energy beyond the door. Be careful, Master Young-ho also felt it. That's why he decided to concentrate on the flow of the mana. Green flames blossomed out of Young-ho's eyes, as if he was using the power of evolution. The demon world was created by mana. Until small creatures became demons, they all had their own mana. Each mana had different characteristics, the color and attribute. Through the power of evolution, Young-ho was able to read a spirit's potential. The skill also revealed the color and the attributes of their mana. Because of that, Young-ho did more than feel the flow of the mana. It was possible for him to look at the color and the attribute beyond the iron door. It was like the spirit of the dungeon had mentioned. There was a feeling of strong mana. The mana was stronger than the large demon he encountered before Heatflame. Sharp yellow. It rose up in between the iron door. It created a whirlpool, and that flow became faster. Young-ho yelled to the side. Kobold and John, who were extremely nervous, quickly threw their bodies to the right wall. Young-ho pulled Catalina by her waist and went to the left wall, and during all of this, Catalina stretched out her hand and pulled Skull, who was standing there with a blank expression. And an empty space was created. Rumble. The heat wave was moving at a fast rate. With a loud boom, the iron door became dented and it burned the yellow smoke, a pillar of flame. The kobold and John were shaking in fear. Skull's jaw dropped, and Young-ho inspected the room beyond the dented iron door. Catalina yelled. Salamander Young-ho saw it as well. The thing that was burning within the darkness looked like a large lizard. Yellow flames enveloped its entire body, and because of that, flame was a better description than a living thing. Young-ho quickly asked, "Is it a spirit or something? Does it not have an actual body or something?" In a game that Young-ho enjoyed playing, a salamander usually appeared as the spirit of the flame. Catalina quickly answered, "It's not completely a spirit. It's close, but it's an evil spirit of fire that lives by devouring mana. After Catalina yelled, she jumped off the ground. Yong-ho quickly stood up straight. It was because the salamander started moving. Just one enemy. There wasn't a lot. Just one. The flame that burned the air was terrifying. But if fire was their only weapon, then there were ways they could defeat them. Yong-ho tightened his grip on arm and roar. The salamander roared, and at the same time, released fire from its mouth as it walked out of the armory. The length of the salamander was probably 4 meters long. With an opponent like that, there was nothing John and Kobold could do. Yong-ho exchanged glances with Catalina again. The spirit that belonged to the dungeon and the owner understood each other just with one glance, and they both started running in opposite directions. It's this side. Catalina jumped off the ground and yelled as if they were provoking it. With Yong-ho on her back, she jumped from the ground to the wall to the ceiling and back to the ground. Catalina's agile movements made the salamander focus on her. The salamander ran towards Catalina and spit out fire. Like a real lizard, their movements were extremely fast. Catalina didn't scream. Even though she was known as the klutzy knight, she was still the knight of the House of Mammon, and was the most trustworthy soldier within the dungeon. Instead of shaking in fear, she focused on their movement. She used her crossbow and attacked the salamander. However, despite her attack, the salamander didn't care and didn't slow down at all. The arrows pierced through the salamander's body, but it wasn't enough to pierce through its thick skin. Catalina Yong-ho yelled. Catalina kicked off the wall without any hesitation and widened the distance between her and the salamander. Her attention was now on Yong-ho master. She yelled without realizing. She didn't have a choice. Yong-ho ran towards the salamander. As if he were charging with a lance, a green flame started emitting out of Amon. It wasn't holding back, and the flames resembled a wild animal. Roar. The salamander turned its head towards Yong-ho and spit out fire. Since they were so close, dodging was difficult. However, that wasn't a problem. Yong-ho wasn't thinking about dodging it in the first place. Roar. At the same time, the salamander roared. The green flame that Amon was releasing ran straight through the fire that the salamander spit out. The flame ate the fire. It was a gamble. And he succeeded. The distance between Yong-ho and the salamander closed immediately. Amon pierced through the salamander's side. Roar. The salamander roared and moved violently. Not just from its mouth, but flames were released throughout its entire body. It was hot. The flames were so hot that it would easily melt metal. However, Yong-ho didn't step away. Amon's fiery path was blocking Yong-ho within the fire. Yong-ho twisted Amon and pushed it into the salamander mauve. It was tiring, even after his body became stronger after becoming a demon. Yong-ho used all of his strength to push it in, and the heavy salamander let out a painful scream and pushed him to the side. Skull. It was an unexpected assist. The large, sturdy hammer drew a beautiful line. It fell vertically and fell on the head of the salamander that was rolling around in pain. The salamander was the evil spirit of fire. Due to the shock that it received, it couldn't come back to its senses. On top of that, Skull didn't stop attacking it. Skull. Skull crazily swung the hammer and was targeting the salamander's head. Yong-ho was trying to corner the salamander into a wall, but all he could do was watch Skull with a blank face. Skull is bigger help than Catalina. Yong-ho expressed his thoughts without knowing, and Catalina flinched. Because she wanted to be helpful, she jumped off the ground so that she could win superiority over Skull. However, Catalina didn't really have much to do. Fire was the monster's strongest weapon, but it was blocked by Yong-ho, and on top of that, they were feeling groggy because Skull kept on hitting their head. It was impossible for them to swing their tail and release fire. Catalina walked up next to Yong-ho and unsheathed her dagger. However, she didn't know where she should use it. Also, Skull raised the hammer high and roared as if telling Catalina to hear them. Shkaku, Shkaku. Yong-ho watched them and couldn't help but laugh. He used all of his mana at once in order to defeat the salamander. But thanks to Skull, they were able to win easily. Shall we finish it? Amon was still pierced into the salamander's side, and after taking it out, he looked at it. Maybe it's because they were groggy, but their fire was really weak, and they just looked like an ordinary lizard now. Like with the giant, he had to absorb the salamander's spirit. In order to do that, he had to kill the salamander first. Yong-ho's eyes turned cold. He wasn't hesitant about killing a creature that was alive, but he was greedy about absorbing its spirit. He gulped without knowing. He felt pleasure when absorbing it. His mana increased because of it. Yong-ho raised arm, and right before it pierced into the monster, Catalina grabbed Yong-ho's arm. "Please, wait, master." Catalina froze in place after saying it. His expression became scary after she interrupted him from killing and absorbing the spirit, but it was only for a moment. Yong-ho regained his consciousness and started catching his breath. After shaking his head once, she spoke. "What is it?" Catalina. Yong-ho was normal. As a spirit that belonged to the dungeon, grabbing the owner's arm and interrupting him was considered rude. Catalina let out a sigh of relief and gulped. She spoke while pointing towards Salamander. "The salamander is an evil spirit that's been misused. If you train it right, it'll definitely become a rank 3 spirit. It already lost, and I'm sure they've realized that their fire is no match against yours. So I'm sure it's possible for you to train them." There was some information in the middle that he didn't understand, but he understood the general concept. Now that he thought about it, Eligor did mention something about training the dungeon monsters in the prison. Yong-ho looked at the salamander again. The salamander was definitely a strong spirit. If Yong-ho didn't have armor on, then there's no way he would be able to fight them. It wasn't odd for the previous owners to give up on finding the armory because of them, and Helby using the salamander as his subordinate. Yong-ho sheathed Aemon. He did what Catalina had suggested. "Good job, Catalina. You managed to get the salamander's attention during the battle. You're definitely my knight." When he petted her head while complimenting her, her ears started flapping. "It's nothing. It's my job as the knight." The way she glanced over at Skull was cute. Yong-ho did his best to contain his laughter and called over John and Kobold, who were standing in the corner. Now, it was time for them to fulfill their actual goal. "Okay, let's empty out." "No, let's check," Yong-ho commanded, and the spirits followed Catalina's lead, arm to end. Chapter 23. Armed 3. Got it. "Stay here, and if you feel that the monster is going to wake up, hit its head again and make them pass out." Yong-ho spoke while looking at the salamander that fainted. Skull nodded while holding the hammer above its head. "I am a bit worried, though." He was more worried about the salamander than Skull. He was worried that something might happen because they were getting hit too many times. "I don't think they'll wake up anytime soon, so it might end before anything happens. And causing more trouble to obtain the salamander would put him at a disadvantage." Yong-ho was the type to make sure this didn't happen. "Great, next Kobold, you stay with..." Skull. Kobold flinched as they gulped while looking towards the armory. The Kobold were low-rank spirits, just like the goblins, and were known to be true to their nature. If there was an item in front of them, it's highly likely that they'll steal it. The Kobold had sort of a disappointed expression because of his command, but when Catalina glared at them, they whimpered and lowered their head. A few minutes after beating the salamander. After organizing everything, Yong-ho headed towards the armory, along with Catalina and John beyond the half-dented steel door. It was really dark. Before entering the armory, he called the spirit of the dungeon facility. "It'll make sure you're in control of the armory. In order to activate it, it will use up almost all of the mana you have left. There's a high chance that you may feel a bit dizzy. Is that okay?" He knew they were worried, but he couldn't back down now. The goal was right in front of him. Of course. After Yong-ho approved, the spirit of the dungeon didn't hesitate. It gathered every bit of Yong-ho's mana and activated the armory. Gah! The spirit of the dungeon wasn't lying. Yong-ho's legs became weak and he stumbled for a second, but regained his balance. "It's fine, I'm just really tired." Catalina looked at him worriedly, and Yong-ho tried his best to concentrate. He observed the darkness within the armory. The spirit of the dungeon spoke. "The armory is now under our control. It'll cast away the darkness." As soon as they finished talking, marbles of light appeared on the ceiling, just like the other activated rooms. "So the salamander has been living here for over 10 years. As the darkness was disappearing, Yong-ho quietly mumbled, and Catalina answered immediately. "As I have explained during the battle, they're not a complete spirit, but an evil spirit that's close to being one. They live by consuming mana. It's highly possible that they've been asleep, just like a bear that hibernates during the winter." Yong-ho nodded at the reasonable explanation, and seconds later, the darkness within the armory disappeared. The armory was bigger than what he expected. Both sides of the walls were filled with shelves, and those shelves were filled with weapons and gear. It looked like there were over 20 items. A natural smile appeared on Yongho's face. They were weapons that the previous owner collected. They were for the spirits that lived during that time. Among them, there were definitely good and bad weapons. Despite the fact that Yongho used up his mana, greed filled his soul and it started using its senses. There aren't any traps within the armory. However, there may be items that are cursed. Please be careful when wearing them. Yongho nodded his head and started walking. As always, greed was leading Yongho. A shield before a weapon. Yongho did his best to let greed take over his mind, whatever it's longing for the most, the item that he needs the most. The weapons weren't strong enough to be compared to Aemon. Right now, Yongho needed a shield more than a weapon. His senses were all over the place and then focused on one area. Greed didn't go against Yongho's will. It acknowledged his will and led the way. Yongho walked again. The salamander must have curled up while sleeping, because he walked past a smoky mark on the ground. Instead of looking at the lance or the swords that were on the shelves, he decided to walk forward. He felt a small amount of mana flowing. The magical weapons within the armory were probably releasing the mana. However, greed had no interest in them. It only focused on the item that was going to fill Yongho's desire. Yongho's eyes landed on a well-made chain armor. It was an item that was made by weaving small chains, and despite the fact that it spent over 10 years in this armory, it looked as if it were made yesterday. However, this wasn't it. Yongho passed the armor, and he ended up stopping in front of the shelf that was located in the innermost part of the armory. The gear he was expecting wasn't there. A small, elegant wooden box was sitting on the shelf. A wolf consuming the moon was carved into it. The symbol of the owner from 3 generations ago was carved into it. Yongho carefully opened the box. A ring, a red fabric, was glued onto the inside of the box, and a silver ring was all that was inside. On the area where a gem would be sitting, a small round plate was on it. The plate also had the head of a wolf consuming the moon. A spell was on the ring. Even though he didn't wear it yet, he could feel its mana. But why? It felt familiar. It wasn't strange. Like the spirit of the dungeon mentioned, wearing a magical item that he was seeing for the first time was extremely dangerous. However, Yongho raised the ring. It wasn't because he lost his mind, because he was dazed by greed's desire. This ring won't harm him. He knew it. He could feel it. The ring was small and looked like it would fit on a woman's finger. But when the ring got closer to his finger, the hole widened. Yongho breathed in deeply and placed the ring on his finger. He accepted the mana that the ring had gray hair. It was a different color from Catalina's, which was close to white. The face of a woman with beautiful white hair and a fierce face appeared in his head, but it disappeared like smoke. It was strange, but a familiar mana Yongho understood. This was the mana that belonged to the owner from 3 generations ago. A part of her power was contained within this ring. The Queen of Distortion, Chwiryong. Yongho had no direct connections with her, but she was a descendant of the King of Greed, Mammon. He was able to feel that from the remaining mana. Yongho implanted the remaining mana. He revealed Chwiryong's power. The ring was on his left hand and above it, light refracted. It was in the shape of a small tray. The power of distortion created the shield of distortion. The shield disappeared not too long after Yongho didn't have enough mana to maintain the power. It uses a lot of mana, but he couldn't ignore its effects. He didn't test it out yet, but Yongho knew the power of distortion distorted space. Because of that, the shield that was created with it was probably amazing. It's small, but still, I can see why Greed chose this instead of the gear. In some ways, it was the shield that Yongho wanted. It wasn't heavy, and it was something he could activate as long as he used his mana. He could use it while fighting with Amon, the owner from 3 generations ago. He didn't expect it to be a woman. Yongho had a bitter smile on his face as he closed the box and turned around. John and Catalina were walking around the armory while looking at the different gear. Catalina was looking at the chain armor, and Yongho asked after noticing Catalina, "Are you able to analyze this item, or check to see what kind of magic was casted on it?" The owner from 3 generations ago, Yongho was able to check Chwiryong's ring, but it was impossible to check the other items. The House of Mammon's mana probably wasn't the only mana that was contained in the magical items, Catalina answered right away, as if she had thought about it before. Eligor is the one that will able to analyze the magical items. It may not be a perfect analysis, but he'll be able to easily tell whether it's cursed or not. That was enough. Yong-ho happily nodded. Great. Let's gather the items that have magic casted on them. We can come back later, but let's take as much as we can. Yes, sir, Catalina answered right away. John, who was standing near, nodded as well. Chapter 24. Armed 4. We should have brought a cart or something. There were about 40-something different items within Kaiwan's armory. There were a total of 7 items where a magic spell was cast on them. 1 helmet, 2 armors, 3 swords, and 1 shield. He could take them by himself if he wore them, but since he couldn't wear them now, he had no choice but to take them by hand. He gave them to Skull, John, and Kobold, and gave the Kobold a shield so that they couldn't hide it. After giving them the items, Young-ho approached the salamander that was in the corner of the room. It seemed like they were hit on the head pretty hard because their movement was extremely sluggish. When they realized that Young-ho was approaching them, they showed their teeth and growled, but that didn't last long. When Young-ho slightly raised Aemon, the salamander backed down, and when Skull raised the hammer, it started whimpering. Just like Catalina mentioned earlier, it seemed like it acknowledged the fact that it couldn't beat. Young-ho, asked Catalina, how do I register the dungeon monster's spirit? Is it the same as registering ordinary spirits? It's quite different, but the things that you have to do are similar. The complicated tasks can be done by the spirit of the dungeon. The important thing is that the dungeon monster needs to have the will to submit to you. The salamander already submitted themselves. Young-ho took 1 step forwards towards the salamander and slightly raised his hand. After placing his left hand above the salamander's head, he called the spirit of the dungeon, "Will you register the salamander as a dungeon spirit? It will require more mana than ordinary spirits. Since you've already used a lot of your mana, we can use the remaining mana that's in the dungeon if you'd like." Like Catalina mentioned, what Young-ho needed to do was similar. Once he confirmed with the spirit of the dungeon, a small white magic circle appeared between Young-ho's hand and the salamander's head. Registration complete. The salamander is a spirit of the dungeon. To prove that, a complicated-looking magic circle appeared on top of the salamander's forehead. Maybe it's because they were a dungeon monster, but the way they were treated by the dungeon shop was different from ordinary spirits. Acquired salamander. The current situation was great, but he became curious. Young-ho asked his question into the air. Can I use the remaining mana that's in the dungeon? If Young-ho was able to implant his mana into the dungeon, wouldn't it be possible for him to use the remaining? It's possible. However, it won't be as effective as the mana that you implant into me. How big of a difference is there? During the implementation process, about 30 of the mana will be damaged. It was a percentage he could endure. On top of that, Young-ho didn't need that much mana for what he was going to do. With the spirit of the dungeon's guidance, Young-ho was able to absorb a part of the remaining mana. The way that the mana entered into his body from the ceiling and from the floor was interesting. Great. Let's test it. Young-ho smiled, and green flames blossomed out of his eyes. The power of evolution started analyzing the salamander. Race: Salamander M class, evil spirit, mid-rank, main element, fire. Main stats: physique strength, development rate, 0-100. Maybe it's because Young-ho became stronger, but he was now able to see the class category. To test it out, he looked at Catalina, who was standing next to him. Name: Catalina. F-Wef race: half succubus, half dark elf. Wef class: demon. Mid-rank. Main elements: wind, darkness. Secondary elements: thunder, water, earth. Main stats: succubus, charm, mana, dark elf. Agility, courage, development rate, 70,000 and rude. Another category showed up for Catalina as well. A mid-rank demon. Young-ho was going to analyze Skull as well, but he looked at the salamander again. He didn't absorb a lot of the dungeon's mana. Physique level 222. Development roots will be revealed upon advancement. Agility level 122. 5. Development roots will be revealed upon advancement. Mana level 215. Strength level 122. As expected, they've developed a lot. On top of that, the additional information regarding the roots were useful. Yong-ho slowly raised his finger into the air. When he touched the physique category, it showed a silhouette of their development, and the result was interesting. It's because the large salamander grew bigger. It was an estimate, but it grew at least 1-2 times larger. Yong-ho also looked at its agility. Since they had potential, he was excited to see the results. He drew in the air again. Yong-ho yelled without realizing it. Wings. Because he suddenly yelled out, everyone, including the salamander, looked at Yong-ho with a surprised look. After taking a deep breath, he looked at the silhouette again. When developing their agility, the salamander had wings that resembled a bat's wings. There wasn't a big difference, but their body became slimmer. It said that development routes will be revealed when agility has been developed. He couldn't know as of right now, but Yong-ho was able to assume it was possible for them to develop into a flying type. On the bright side, they may resemble a dragon. A smile appeared on his face. It was a good thing he listened to Catalina and took them in as a spirit. Good job, Catalina. Yong-ho complimented her while patting her shoulder. It happened all of a sudden. But since it was still a compliment, Catalina smiled sheepishly and thanked him. Whew, great, let's go back. Yong-ho stopped using the power of evolution and looked at everyone. After returning, he decided to ask Eligor to inspect the magical items, and after recovering his mana, he was going to develop the spirits. This put him in a good mood. Yong-ho took the lead, and Catalina and the rest followed him. Salamander did the same. He wasn't sure how they knew he returned, but all the spirits, including Eligor, were all in the Demon King's room. As the representative, Eligor showed his respect towards Yong-ho. You have returned, master. How did you know? The goblins usually slept in the corner of the room, so he would sometimes see them in the room, but that wasn't the case for the treant. This was the first time he's seen the treant in this room, Eligor explained while smiling. I received a call from the spirit of the dungeon. As a spirit that belongs to the dungeon, I'm able to have simple conversations, but can't talk about anything complicated like you do with the spirit. Now that he thought of it, last time when the dungeon was being attacked, Eligor called all the spirits and locked the door. After nodding his head, Catalina and the other spirits placed the magic items in one place. We only brought the magical items for now. We need to bring the others later. Oh, after looking at the magical items, tears started forming in Eligor's eyes. It couldn't be helped. It was the same armory that the previous owners gave up on finding. You have done well. Sir Eligor tried his best to suppress his feelings as he spoke. Yong-ho shrugged his shoulders. I'm not the only one that worked. Everyone did well. Skull and Yong-ho stopped talking and slightly rolled his eyes. He saw Catalina's ears flinch. Catalina worked the hardest. Catalina bowed her head after hearing his comment. She was probably trying to hide the smile she couldn't contain. On the other hand, Skull was expressing his joy by waving the hammer in the air. They were the dungeon's reliable treasure. Eligor spoke while wiping away his tears. We've prepared water for you to wash in, and food as well. Please rest up. He was able to smell the food. Yong-ho was desperate to rest, but the magical items were urgent. Does it take a long time to inspect the items? Is there something that's required other than mana? For strong magical items, there are times when special preparations need to be made, but the weaker ones can be inspected right away. And they were within the armory that belonged to the owner from 3 generations ago. Even if the items were cursed, it only activates when those outside of the House of Mammon wears them. It was as if he prepared the answer because Eligor spoke with ease. Yong-ho tilted his head. Ha! It's possible to tell the difference. It's because the spirits of the House of Mammon register themselves in the dungeon. It's similar to getting a tattoo to differentiate them. In other words, there was no need to be worried about the curse. Now that I think about it, there wasn't a curse on this ring either. Yong-ho nodded his head. If the items weren't cursed, then they could use each of the items and check its effects in that moment. Catalina quietly coughed and caught Yong-ho's attention. She pointed to the others with her eyes. Oh, introductions have been overdue. Yong-ho spoke, and Catalina reacted to it. I'll bring them. When he mentioned introduction, Eligor just blinked his eyes. It was the same case for Ron and the goblins, moments later. After Catalina passed through the open door, Eligor exclaimed, Salamander. The goblins were filled with fear after seeing a lizard that was covered in flames. Even Treyant was surprised that it started moving around. Did you register the monster that was guarding the armory as a dungeon spirit? Eligor managed to talk while panting. Young-ho nodded. Yeah. It was Catalina's idea. However, it seemed like Eligor didn't really hear the last part about Catalina. After he admired the salamander a couple of times, he looked at Young-ho. Oh my, I can't stop being amazed by your skills. Not only did he reclaim the armory that the previous owners couldn't, but he managed to register the salamander as a dungeon spirit. It's only been about 10 days since Young-ho ascended the throne, so it was a pretty amazing accomplishment. Instead of being proud, he patted Eligor's shoulder. They headed towards the place that had the food that Eligor and the other spirits prepared. Eligor prepared a lot after hearing the news, but the food wasn't all that special. Currently, out of clothing, food, and shelter, they were borderline between poverty and sufficient. Their main source of food came from whatever Catalina caught during her hunts, and the grain that was provided by the dungeon shop from the payment they made beforehand. At first, it seemed like there was a lot, but since they had a lot more mouths to feed now, they felt that it wasn't enough. After eating a pancake, Young-ho looked at Eligor. Hey, Eligor, yes sir, how do you earn money in the demon world? From what Young-ho knew, in the older generations, they lived off of the taxes they received from their territory. Demon, meaning if an owner is placed into aristocracy, the dungeon becomes their territory. However, he was getting suspicious whether it was possible to have an income through this dungeon. Instead of answering right away, he thought for a second and then spoke. I'm not sure about the human world that you lived in, but I believe the way that money is earned is quite similar. The demon world was a place where people lived within demon families. Even though the law of the jungle applied here, society can't be maintained if everyone killed each other. There are several ways you can earn money through the dungeon. Eligor didn't talk in a soft tone. The only person that cared about Young-ho's current conversation was Catalina. The goblins and kobold were busy stuffing their faces with the food that was before them, and Skull was rolling around the floor as usual. The main method is to trade the various items that are produced within the dungeon. It was the most exemplary answer. Eligor continued talking. There's no facility yet, but there are various ways to produce items within the dungeon. There are dungeons that produce different medicinal and magical plants, and there are dungeons that trade mana itself. The previous owner raised various magical plants. Like how farmers farm and catch fish, the dungeon grows different items and sells them, but it didn't stop at just selling simple items. There are times when spirits are sold and bought to earn a living. I don't know about later, but that's a method I want to avoid right now. Young-ho immediately spoke up, and Eligor admired him. You're definitely wise. Young-ho had the power of evolution, which allowed him to evolve the spirits. After purchasing low-rank spirits like Skeleton and the Goblins, if he evolved them and then sold them, he would be able to get some money quickly, even if it wasn't as much mid-rank spirits. However, that would let the world know about Young-ho's existence. Spirits that have evolved were special. If those spirits were shown at the market, it would get the attention of the demons in the demon world. The House of Mammon was still too weak. Right now wasn't the time to let the demon world know about Young-ho's existence and about how he was from the human world also. I can't say that punishments are a method, but after fighting off the enemy, there are times when you're able to obtain items from them. Just like the guy I took down last time, the green cape that Young-ho was wearing belonged to them. Eligor expressed the pros and cons at the same time. There are times when intruders are part of the same demon family, but there are times when figures from the human world invade the dungeon. Figures from the human world. Yes, and with all due respect, you're technically a figure of this world as well. It's because you were born and raised in the human world. In some ways, he was right. Eligor continued his explanation. There are times when special spaces within the demon world connect to the human world. Even with this connection, nothing bad really happens and it's resolved peacefully. But there are times when that doesn't happen. An owner that controls a dungeon sometimes enters the human world and attacks, and humans do the same as well. No matter which side wins, they're able to obtain a considerable amount of items. There are a couple of demons that grew at a fast rate because of this, and have been written in the demon world's history. It meant that a soldier fought with a demon of a dungeon. Yong-ho remembered the games that he played before, and a frown appeared on his face. Yong-ho was now the boss monster that protected the dungeon. It's something I would like to decline. It doesn't happen often, so you don't have to worry about it. Eligor had a smile after he finished talking and focused on his food again. After putting the pancake into his mouth, Yong-ho drank a cup of water. Even though he achieved something great today, he still had a long way to go. I have to obtain the gold mine. However, obtaining it wasn't going to be easy. There were a lot of crazy ants and slimes, and inside the mine, there might be a queen ant and other dangerous monsters. But still, it's something he could take his time with. When he first entered, Catalina and Eligor were the only spirits in the empty dungeon. But now, the dungeon had advanced a lot. In some ways, it was a very strange story. 2 weeks ago, Yong-ho was the son of a chicken shop owner and was a freshman that majored in computer science. But now, he was an owner of a dungeon and was a demon. In the end, it wasn't a light topic. If he didn't do anything, demons will invade and target the heart of the dungeon, and in the end, he'll lose his life. But Yong-ho couldn't deny it. The current situation and the days that he spent in a dungeon were fun. Was this Yong-ho's own feelings, or was it greed's influence? Yong-ho didn't think too deep into it. It didn't matter which side it was, but that's what he felt right now. He'll get stronger. He'll have it in his hands. He'll move forward. His primary goal was to install the door of the room. How far would he be able to go? What will he find once he reaches that point? Yong-ho didn't try to find the answer. He looked at the spirits. He had the same warm smile that Eligor had. Armed for End. Chapter 25. Elite 1. Law of the Jungle, Survival of the Fittest. However, there isn't just one supreme being. There were 6 kings that ruled the large demon world. Typically, one king ruled one dungeon. However, that wasn't a rule. It was just a typical case. There are demon kings that rule several dungeons. They command the demons in those dungeons in order to have more power. And the 6 demon kings were already ruling over 10 dungeons, the southeast part of the demon world. The king of gluttony, who also ruled over one of the 7 territories, had several dungeons as well. They commanded 43 owners and had 60 dungeons. It's beautiful. The king of gluttony spoke. It was a deep and rough voice. He was massive. Their height was about 3 meters. Under the shoulders that looked like castle walls, there were 2 long arms that touched the ground. Their arms were so big that they could be compared to a spire or a pillar. Because their jaw was well developed, it looked similar to a trapezoid. The teeth that were shown whenever they spoke looked similar to a shark's. The king of gluttony slightly opened his eyes. They raised their head that had 6 horns and observed the spirit that was in front of him. A wide, white fabric that enveloped their purple skin fluttered. In front of the king, a large monster bowed their head politely. They were so big that they were over 20 meters tall, making the room look small. It was a dragon. Among the undead spirits, they were considered to be one of the highest ranked spirit. The actual body of the dragon was so large that when it spread its wings and started flying, it felt like its body was going to cover the entire sky. It's a relief that you're satisfied. A brown-colored incubus that was wearing a black suit had a warm smile on their face. They were responsible for the trade that happened between the dungeon shop and the king of gluttony. Gluttony spoke again. Their body seemed strong as well. What kind of dragon was it again? If it's this big, then blue or red? It's red. They're one of the many that has the king of violence's blood flowing within them. Oh, so they're his descendant. They're the 4th generation. I don't know about other things, but when it comes to their body and physical strength, it's safe to assume that they're the descendant of the king of violence. The king of violence was one of the demon kings that ruled the demon world. They were one of the kings that had superhuman strength, and out of the dragons that existed within the demon world, they were known to be the strongest. It seems like they're still not interested in their descendants. If they had to take care of all of their descendants, then they'll have to take care of over 20. On top of that, they're currently resting, so it can't be helped. The king of gluttony was also in the same position when it came to not showing interest. It's because direct descendants will be separated into a different group anyways. The reason why the king of gluttony was disappointed was simple. They didn't like the king of violence. Their existence made them feel uncomfortable. The kings represented the 7 deadly sins and also had superhuman abilities. Only those that had both are able to really reign over the demon world. In that case, isn't it a requirement to possess one of the sins in order to fight over the dominance of the demon world? The king of violence. They weren't part of the 7 deadly sins. They just had an ability that the other kings had. The king of gluttony had a frown on their face to express their discomfort and looked at the dragon again. After thinking about their descendant becoming their spirit, it made them feel a bit better. What happened to purchasing the Death Knight and the Elder Lich that I mentioned before? Since you wanted the transaction to be done discreetly, it will take more time. Since there aren't a lot of high-rank spirits, there are those that are sensitive to the quantity. The 6 kings are currently standing against each other, and transaction details of high-rank spirits can be important to them. The king of gluttony stroked the gauntlet that was on their left hand, which provided one of the superhuman ability. They didn't like how long it took, but in order to continue with their current plan, they needed time. The south is empty. It was the area that the great king of greed, Mammon, took care of right now. It was just a bare land that didn't have much, but they weren't planning on taking it. There were over 20 dungeons there, and even though they were weak, each of the dungeons had owners. They couldn't go there since they were the king. If they did, then the other kings would definitely stand up and go against them. But what if someone else dominated the empty land in the south? And what if that someone dominated that land and devoted themselves to the king of gluttony? All the different situations that can occur during that process. They needed to come up with a plan to handle those situations and to surprise the other kings. The dragon that was in front of him was just the start of his plan. He'll wait. The king spoke softly, and the incubus showed their respect. The dragon bowed its head and didn't move. Let's go that way, roar, roar. John and Ron both answered after Yong-ho shouted. Instead of wielding a bamboo spear, they wielded a sword and shield. Beside them were 2 goblins, Yon and June, who specialized in agility and intellect. Instead of fighting on their own, the 4 goblins gathered and were in formation. Since Ron specialized in stamina, they held a shield and were in charge of defense, while John used an axe to attack since they specialized in strength. Yon specialized in agility, so they used a long lance to attack any openings, and June directed the other goblins since they were intelligent. They formed a team that used their specialized skills. Yong-ho called the goblins the Heavenly Guardian of the Goblins, and Goblin Ranger, Yong-ho, was satisfied by how they were fighting against the crazy ants and turned his attention elsewhere. Skull now had a shield and was even wearing armor, and they were continuously beating the crazy ants. Evolving it from a skeleton soldier to a skeleton warrior was a good idea because they were fighting pretty well. Before, it seemed like they were just swinging the hammer around, but now it seemed like they planned their every move. It's been 4 days since they reclaimed Kaiwan's armory. Thanks to his mana developing, he had a lot more mana, and just developing the dungeon didn't satisfy him. He evolved the goblins, Catalina, and even Skull, who was now known as the dungeons. Ace reclaiming the mine with their current strength was impossible. That's why Yong-ho rushed in to gain experience. Instead of going into the mine, he stayed around it and hunted the crazy ants and slimes. It decreases the number of enemies, and I get experience from it. Training helped him gain experience, but not as much as an actual battle. It would have been nice if I can obtain a spirit. Unfortunately, it was difficult to obtain a spirit from a crazy ant or a slime. It was because both of the dungeon monsters didn't have a lot of mana, but more importantly, there was a big difference between them and Yong-ho. Even if they were part of the same family, if there's a big difference, you won't be able to obtain their spirit. In order to become stronger, you have to take down an opponent that's similar to you or stronger and absorb their spirit. Yong-ho remembered what Catalina told him and turned his attention elsewhere. He saw Catalina fighting a group of crazy ants and ant soldiers that appeared. Yong-ho activated the power of evolution. Name, Catalina F. Race, half succubus, half dark elf. Class, spirit mid-rank. Main elements, wind, darkness. Secondary elements, lightning, water, earth. Main stats, succubus, charm, mana, dark elf. Agility. Courage, what is, development rate, 9911. Succubus, charm level 03, development route opened. Dark elf, agility level 235. 5. Development route opened. HAC Purid, level 835. Development route will open once it has been evolved. Succubus, mana level HAC Puri. 5. Development route opened. AT, Dark Elf. Courage level 133. Development route opened. Succubus, Shadow Elf. Just from seeing her information, it felt like he should evolve her. Right now, out of the 5 categories, development routes were open for 4 of them. There were 2 different development routes. Anything related to the succubus will evolve them into a succubus, and those related to the dark elf will evolve them into a shadow elf. The power of evolution wasn't perfect yet. Every time Yong-ho became stronger, that skill became stronger as well, and a new category is revealed each time. The level for those related to the succubus are all 0. But the development routes are open. That probably means that Shell evolved from being a half succubus to a full succubus. In that sense, it was difficult to say that it was an actual development. It would have been better if the dark elf developed into a totally different being. Which side was he going to choose? This was Yong-ho's first concern, but not now. It's because there was a category that made him continuously worry hybrid. It was the only one where the development route wasn't open. What would happen if she was developed into a hybrid? What kind of development route would appear? Catalina was a mix between a succubus and a dark elf. In that case, instead of developing her into one of those race, wouldn't it be better to keep both and use their advantages? The problem is that he's not sure about anything. He couldn't just evolve her, hoping for the best. Like how games require more experience points, the more you level up, the development rate increased as well. The number still remained at 100, but it required a lot more experience in order to fill 1 point. He also couldn't ignore the fact that depending on the development potential of a route changes as well. If it was a game character, he could refer to websites and get help or test it out with the thought that Hez getting a new character. I should ask her about it. Even though she was a spirit that belonged to the dungeon, she had her own character. She wasn't dumber than the goblins or had trouble communicating like Skull, so it was best to go with whatever she wanted. Great. After taking down the ant soldiers, that's when hell talk. It seemed like the development rate was going to reach 100 anyways. After making up his mind, Yong-ho waved his finger in the air and created a window of light that contained the dungeon's map. A dungeon stats window was created in order to see it all at once, and it displayed the spirit's condition. Catalina, Skull, and the goblins were fighting against the crazy ants, along with Yong-ho Trent, and the kobolds were training in front of the Demon King's room. The salamander and Eligor were hunting outside of the dungeon. There were already 13 spirits. Compared to when he started out with 3 members, the amount of food and mana consumption couldn't be compared. It's better to start off with a few. He couldn't increase the amount of spirits. He had to improve their power. It was better to create a small group and target the gold mine. A few. Even though it wasn't enough to call it a troop, it didn't matter. There was a certain romance and stylishness to the word few. It would be great if a similar level monster appeared now to help gain experience. They can increase their development rate and acquire a spirit. Yong-ho laughed because he even thought that it was a selfish system. And in that moment, an intruder appeared in the dungeon. The spirit of the dungeon shouted, and Yong-ho quickly rolled his eyes. Catalina was catching her breath after taking down the ant soldiers, and their eyes met. It was only for a short moment. Yong-ho and Catalina turned around at the same time. Skull and the goblins did the same thing. All of them started running towards the throne room. Elite 1, End. Chapter 26. Elite 2. What's the current situation? It's only been a couple of seconds since they started running, Yong-ho asked while running. The spirit of the dungeon quickly answered. There are currently 5 orcs and 1 imp left. They broke through most of the traps. 3 of their imps were killed thanks to the traps. The Treant and the kobolds are getting ready to fight against the enemy. Yong-ho gritted his teeth. There wasn't a lot of time. No matter how fast they ran, they would arrive after the enemy. Tell them to retreat to the throne room. Buy some time. Even though he ran out of breath, he couldn't stop. Even if it was a small amount, there was some distance between him and the goblins. That's impossible. The battle has started. There were 4 kobolds and 1 treant. They had 5 orcs and 1 imp. They saw the throne room at the end of the hall. Yong-ho started thinking. Instead of regretting the battle that already started, he decided to gather all the information regarding the battle that was going to occur from now on. 5 orcs. There was one that looked like the leader, while the others looked like their underlings. According to the video that the spirit of the dungeon showed, they were wearing similar gear, armor that covers the shoulders, chest, and arms. The leader is wearing a black helmet and armor. Young-ho focused on the fact that the armor was the same. It was a uniform. The gear was provided. It meant that they belonged to a group. Catalina ran ahead and opened the door. Young-ho continued running. It sounded like there was a fight beyond the door. They're wielding either an axe or a sword. There aren't any long-distance weapons. 2 kobolds have been killed. It was similar to a scream. Catalina opened another door. The smell of blood filled his nose. It was a terrible sight. It was red. It wasn't just from the 2 kobolds' corpse. Using its axe, an orc attacked a kobold and cut its head off. Blood spouted out and filled the air momentarily. Roaya, ah! The Trent started roaring when a couple of its vines were cut off. It was filled with pain and bitterness. And the enemy saw Young-ho and Catalina, the owner. The leader yelled. The orcs that killed the kobolds looked at Young-ho all at once. One of them threw their axe at Young-ho. It was fast and precise. The axe was flying towards Young-ho's forehead. Young-ho saw it. It didn't stop. He ran towards it and raised his left arm. There wasn't any blood. It didn't injure Young-ho's arm, nor did it stop him from pressing forward. The power of distortion that was released from the tip of his hand distorted the space. The axe bounced off an invisible wall and Young-ho grabbed Armin. He attacked the orcs that were surprised by how the axe bounced off. He didn't yell. He just used Aemon by piercing the abdomen of the orc that was closest to him. After it released its flames for a moment, he took it out. He continued stabbing the other orcs. The orc that was injured couldn't even fight back, and the other orcs couldn't attack Young-ho. It did happen all of a sudden, but it's also because Catalina jumped in between them. It was as if Young-ho and Catalina switched places because he used the crossbow. The first arrow pierced the cheek of an orc that was surprised because of Young-ho, and he targeted the leader next, but the arrow bounced off the shield that the leader used. But this was enough. Catalina didn't look back and unsheathed her sword. Like Young-ho, she attacked the orc that was the nearest Skull. Right when Young-ho pierced the abdomen for the 5th time, Skull joined the fight. Skull roared and swung its hammer towards an orc. Their movement was big, and because they roared, they didn't hit them. But the orc didn't have any choice but to dodge, and through that, time and space was created. The goblin rangers arrived too. Out of the 4, June was the only female, and as the leader, they commanded them. The 4 goblins formed a team and attacked one orc, a few seconds after the attack. After the 5th stab, Young-ho pulled out Aemon and got ready to attack the next. He stepped back while his eyes were focused on the sword that the leader had around their waist. The orc that got stabbed 5 times coughed and fell to the ground. The next thing Young-ho wanted to do, he already made up his mind. It was more like instincts than thinking it through. As he tightened his grip on Armin, he started swinging it as he ran forward. He released a wave of fire. Whoosh! The orcs weren't the only ones that were in front of him. But Young-ho didn't hesitate. That's why the orcs were shocked Catalina didn't try to avoid it. As a spirit that belonged to the dungeon, she trusted her master. Despite the fact that there was fire at her back, she glared at the enemy and cut their head off. The blood that spouted mixed with Young-ho's fire Skull. Skull wasn't afraid of the fire. No, it's more like they didn't know that there was a fire behind them. They were too busy beating the orc with their hammer. The goblins couldn't attack like Catalina and Skull. But it didn't matter. When they cowered in fear, the orc did the same, and it was thanks to the fire that Young-ho released. Was he trying to burn the enemy number Imar? He wasn't strong enough to release a fire that powerful. Young-ho wanted to shock the enemy, and to blind them at the same time. Young-ho ran towards the orc that the goblins were fighting. After the wave of flame disappeared, the orc was shocked by Young-ho's sudden appearance. Young-ho attacked them with Armin by hitting their collarbone. They fell backward, and he pushed his left hand into their mouth. Young-ho couldn't ignore the strength of the orc's jaw. If they just closed their mouth, his hand could be cut off. However, Young-ho was faster than that. Young-ho inserted his mana into Kaiwan's ring, which was on his left hand, the power of distortion. Space had been distorted inside the orc's mouth. Since it happened in such a small space, the orc's neck exploded, and Yong-ho's left arm was pushed back forcefully. Blood spouted out. It was on Yong-ho's face, and he wasn't buried under it. The moment he placed his left hand into their mouth, Yong-ho was already thinking about his next target. Yong-ho and the leader looked at each other. Row, ah, ah. The leader's roar shook the entire room. It wasn't a simple roar. It contained a strong manner. The orc clan's war cry. Catalina noticed it. But it was no use. Their cry already invaded Catalina's head. The goblins started screaming. It was only for a moment, but Catalina felt her body becoming stiff. The kobolds in the Trent that were in pain started shaking in fear. Skull, who was an undead, was the only one that could move freely despite the orc's war cry. Go, the leader shouted. They commanded the imp, the only one that didn't participate in the battle. The imp turned around. With a violent smile, they kicked off the ground. Skull hastily headed towards the leader. And Yong-ho started thinking. He connected all the data. All the orcs were wearing the same armor. The leader made the one imp run away. Did they acknowledge the fact that they lost and they're trying to save the one imp? It didn't make sense. They threw the other imps to check the traps. Then there was only one other reason, Catalina. Yong-ho shouted while his body was stiff. Stop the imp from informing the others about this. The leader swung a large square shield. After pushing Skull aside with it, they looked at Yong-ho and Catalina. Catalina kicked off the ground. She ran towards the imp, and Yong-ho ran as well. In order to stop the leader from going after Catalina, he ran, row, ah, ah, ah. The leader and Yong-ho both shouted at the same time. They glared at each other. The fire shot up. The large axe flew up into the air. The shield of distortion didn't completely block the large axe. Since the attack was really powerful, the axe scratched Yong-ho's left arm. If he endured it any longer, he could have really injured his left arm. And that attack made Yong-ho's attack miss them. Amon stabbed the air, and the fire burned the air. Skull. The hammer that Skull threw saved Yong-ho's life. The leader stepped back and dodged the hammer, and thanks to that, they weren't able to perform their second attack, which allowed Yong-ho to fix his posture. This time, Trient intercepted Roar. Trient raised its roots. Instead of rooting itself to the ground, they stood up and headed towards the leader and Yong-ho. They were extremely slow, but it was very intimidating, and Trient had vines. The leader quickly stepped back and kept their distance from the Trient when they noticed the vines heading towards them. And Yong-ho couldn't tolerate that. The Trient's vines were stretching above them, but he didn't step back. He grabbed Amon again. Raw Trient quickly retracted its vines. The leader raised their shield and tried to block Yong-ho's attack's iron wall. Since he was close, the large square shield looked like a large wall. But Yong-ho didn't care. Instead of stabbing the shield, he pointed Amon to the ground. He originally targeted the leader's lower half of his body, so there weren't any issues. The leader had a confused look, but it was only for a moment. Yong-ho answered, "Fush." Amon released its flames and it enveloped the leader's lower half of their body. It consumed a lot of mana to perform this attack, but Yong-ho didn't care. He gritted his teeth while glaring at the leader. It didn't envelope their entire body. Their green skin that was exposed couldn't endure the heat. Gah! The leader groaned in pain and waved around their axe and shield. They were trying to stop Yong-ho from getting closer. Yong-ho looked at them with cold eyes. He gathered the remaining mana that he had. The scream came from behind the leader. John was released from the leader's war cry and used the axe to attack the leader's back. Skull obtained the orc's weapon that was on the ground and threw it towards the leader's head. It hit it. The leader stumbled when the axe hit their armor. And after observing the situation, Yong-ho used a lance to stab them. It pierced through their neck, which wasn't protected. Once he felt the lace piercing through, he poured out all of his mana. Greed's fire was released. It entered into their neck and burned everything that it touched. The leader couldn't even scream in pain. They writhed in pain while making clicking noises and then stopped. When Yong-ho's hand was no longer on Amon, it stopped releasing its fire, but they were injured pretty badly. Yong-ho started breathing heavily. Instead of performing a final blow, he looked towards the direction that Catalina ran to. The spirit of the dungeon answered for Catalina. Catalina captured the imp. Yong-ho was relieved. Instead of sitting on the ground, he extended his hand out. It was to obtain the leader's spirit. Elite 2. End. Chapter 27. Elite 3. There was immense pleasure the moment he obtained the spirit with his hand. However, he couldn't feel it like he did before. He also couldn't feel any depth. The leader of the orc's physical body was stronger than the giant that invaded before, however. They didn't have a lot of mana. They had a lot less. And since Yong-ho already developed his mana, it didn't help much. But that wasn't the only reason the kobolds died. Out of the 4, 3 of them died. He wasn't sure if it was a coincidence, but it was the same one that attacked the armory with him. It's only been a couple of days since they've become allies. They weren't like Catalina and Eligor, though, and he didn't like them as much as Skull or John. Despite that, he was getting angry. Yong-ho sensed where it was coming from. Greed was the cause of his anger. They harmed something that belonged to him. They looted his belongings. They took away what was his. Despite obtaining the spirit, he felt disappointed. Yong-ho tightened his grip on Amon and collected his breath. He tried to suppress the anger that greed had. Time was passing even during this moment. If his assumptions were right, the orcs belonged to a dungeon. Unlike the giant that invaded last time, there is a high possibility that they were spirits that belonged to a dungeon. He had to find out and prepare for it. Yong-ho closed his eyes. He waited for Catalina and Eligor to return. A couple of minutes after Catalina brought the imp that she captured, Eligor and the salamander returned. After checking the traps that they installed, Eligor imagined what happened and wasn't surprised by it. He took care of the things one by one in a calm manner. Under Eligor's command, the goblins cleaned up the corpses. June and Yon took the armor that the orcs were wearing, and John and Ron moved the orcs and imps' corpses into an empty room. Skull moved the kobolds' corpses into a different empty room. They prepared empty rooms out of the many rooms within the dungeon to put the corpses in. Eligor let the treant rest. After commanding the salamander to guard the entrance, he visited Catalina and Yong-ho, who were in the prison. An hour passed after the battle. After suppressing his anger and agitation, he greeted Eligor with a calm expression. He wanted to rest since he used up all of his mana, but questioning the imp was more important. Imps were small, evil spirits that had green skin. They were smaller and weaker than a goblin, but were more agile and smarter. The imp had a large head and thin arms and legs. As they rolled their large eyes, they glanced between Yong-ho and Eligor. Begin, Yong-ho commanded, and Eligor acted upon it. After opening the prison door, he roughly grabbed the imp who was tied down by a rope. I'll talk, I'll tell you everything. As soon as Eligor grabbed them, the imp shouted frantically. Yong-ho just stood still and watched, and Eligor looked coldly at the imp that was flailing. The imp didn't even look at them anymore. They closed their eyes and spoke. The master sent us Master Foras to capture the dungeon. Sir Terak said it would be easy to capture it since there wasn't an owner. They also said it was to investigate. Eligor's expression changed when he heard the name. Foras. However, he tried not to completely display his emotion. He tightened his grip on the imp's neck and asked, "Who's Terak?" "T, the dead orc. The leader. The one that lead the orcs, eh?" And they even said this, that if there was a new owner, they would check and return right away, that they would notify Master Foras and create an actual army. The imp quickly explained and opened their eyes. They rolled their eyes and yelled again, "I've said everything. I told you everything, I'm not." Lying Yong-ho thought so too, and all the important information was already contained in what the imp said, the one that sent the orcs. The reason why they did this, and the information about what they're planning on doing. Eligor asked again, "What about the size of the spirits that belong to the dungeon? Are there a lot of spirits like Terak T?" "There is, Therese, a whole bunch of orcs over 40. There are 3 that's like Terak." Eligor slightly opened his eyes. He tightened his grip again and asked, And I don't know. I told you everything that I know I did." It didn't look like they were lying this time either. Eligor briefly looked back at Yong-ho. He was asking for Yong-ho's confirmation, and Yong-ho nodded his head. It's because he remembered what Eligor said when he returned to the dungeon. He twisted the imp's neck. He broke their neck and instantly killed them. They've been casted with a spirit confirmation magic. There probably isn't a tracking function, but it's something we should be worried about. Eligor spoke as he pointed to the small magic circle that was drawn on the imp's forehead. It was similar to the magic circle that appeared on the salamander's forehead. Eligor, do you know about the owner? They're one of the owners in the southern part. They're located not that far from this dungeon. We could get there within a day or two by horse. The orcs probably ran all the way here. Yong-ho didn't know exactly how big of a difference there were between riding a horse and running, but he could assume and the strength of their power. Based on all the dungeons within the southern part, they're not the strongest, but they're not the weakest either. When the previous owner was alive, they would sometimes contact each other. Yong-ho questioned him due to the unexpected information. Were they close? Number. They didn't fight against each other, but they would show their desire to obtain this dungeon and would provoke him from time to time. And they've made their move. Yong-ho spoke, but Eligor couldn't answer. The enemy attacked them. They weren't some insignificant spirit that they could get rid of with one fight. They were an owner of a dungeon. Yong-ho started thinking. He tried to look at the bright side of things despite the hopelessness of the situation. It's not the worst situation. We prevented them from providing intel. If we consider the time it takes the orcs to get back after taking over the dungeon, we still have a couple of days to spare. They were moving anyways. However, there was a difference when moving based on precise information and based on assumptions. Since Catalina captured the imp, the enemy didn't get the information. They didn't know how powerful Mammon's dungeon was, and how their troops were killed by the spirits that were in Mammon's dungeon. The time his troops needed to go back. The waiting time. The time needed to make a decision based on limited information. If the orcs successfully finished their job, then they've obtained more time. About 6 to 7 days. Yong-ho could do a lot during that time. He knew the enemy was coming. So, what was he going to do? It was simple. Hell strengthened their defense to repel the enemy. What can he do now? He had a couple of days to make the best decision. Yong-ho started thinking. He decided to start with what he thought was the most important. Yong-ho looked at Catalina. If there was no battle, then everything would have progressed quietly. After leaving the imp to Eligor, Yong-ho entered the throne room with Catalina. Since there wasn't a table they could sit at and talk face to face, they sat on top of the carpet. Their conversation was short and concise. It was Catalina's current condition, the possible routes for evolution. Through the advancement, they could choose between a dark elf and succubus, and the third route was a hybrid. Yong-ho explained each point in detail, and cautiously, Catalina was paying attention. She already experienced the power of evolution once, so she had to listen to him very carefully. This is all I can tell you. I'm sorry, but I can't give you a lot of time. Think about it tonight and tell me your decision tomorrow morning. It was impossible to increase the number of their soldiers right now. In that case, strengthening the current soldiers was the right thing to do. Yong-ho didn't know a lot about Catalina, like how she became one of Mammon's spirits and what kind of history she had. Despite that, he trusted her. Catalina didn't answer right away. Instead of saying she would think about it, she closed her eyes tightly once, and after fixing her posture, she spoke, with all due respect. She stopped talking. Her blue eyes showed that she was nervous, but it was only for a moment. Catalina continued talking. I want to take the hybrid route. Is it because she didn't want to give up the succubus and the dark elf blood? Or because she wanted to keep the advantages of both sides? There could be a lot of reasons. However, Yong-ho just nodded his head and stopped questioning. He let Catalina decide, so all he had to do was follow her decision. On top of that, the hybrid route had the same amount of potential as the others. Her agility was already at level 2, and since she had potential to develop, it might be the route that had more possibility. Since Catalina made her decision, there was no need to waste any more time. Yong-ho pulled Catalina up from her seat. Close your eyes, just like before. Relax. Yong-ho spoke as he stood in front of her. Catalina closed her eyes as she relaxed her body. Yong-ho commanded the spirit of the dungeon. Transfer the remaining mana that the dungeon has to me. Understood, sir. The dungeon's mana filled Yong-ho's body. Yong-ho instinctively circulated the mana. He condensed it into one and split it into two again. Yong-ho placed his hands that was enveloped in mana between her waist and pelvis. He activated the power of evolution hybrid development. It was a greedy decision that didn't give up either race. Yongho's mana pierced through Catalina's body. It pulled out Catalina's potential. Chapter 28, Kaiwan 1. He used the power of evolution many times, but it was different than before. The time needed to develop, and the amount of mana exceeded his expectations. It didn't require a lot of mana when developing a level 0 category to level 1. He asked the spirit of the dungeon to transfer the remaining mana to him in case of an emergency, but the mana was used up within seconds. He used up the remaining mana that he had as well as the mana he got from the spirit of the dungeon. The development wasn't done. Yongho gritted his teeth and used the last of his mana. If he didn't obtain the spirit from the leader of the orcs, he probably wouldn't be able to finish the development. How much time already passed? Catalina's evolution into a hybrid finished Yongho and Catalina both collapsed to the floor at the same time. They started breathing heavily as they leaned against each other. Catalina's body was as hot as fire. Despite the fact that he was exhausted, he tried his best to move. The spirit of the dungeon started saying something, but he couldn't really understand. He tried moving his upper body so that he could stand up, but it was useless. Catalina seemed to have lost consciousness because her body was pressing against his, and since he couldn't endure her weight, he ended up falling backward. Catalina was still hot. Yongho had a hard time staying awake. He used up too much of his mana and stamina. Spirit Elgor, come. The spirit of the dungeon spoke again. Yongho heard every other word, and instead of answering, he concentrated and looked at Catalina. In front of him, he noticed that Catalina's horn was a bit larger than before. Anyways, it turned out for the best. Yongho made a decision. He closed his eyes and fainted. Mana is contained within all demons. It's contained within the bones and skin, and even within the blood. Because of that, a demon can leave themselves within their mana. They could leave their consciousness, a part of their soul, memories, and even a part of their power. It was a black darkness, a total darkness that didn't have any light. They were walking through it. They didn't have any thoughts or feelings. They just kept on walking and moments later lifted their head. I won't fall. It wasn't their voice. It rang in their head. Within this dark world, a dim light appeared. The light formed a figure of a small, young, somewhat vicious girl. The light connected. A new image appeared within the darkness. It was a woman with messy gray hair. She was beautiful, but her vicious eyes said she wasn't going to submit to reality. They struggled as they swallowed their humiliation and accomplished the small tasks. The inactive rooms within the dungeon were activated. They didn't stop in trying to improve the dungeon and continued improving themselves. The woman imagined a sword in her head. After experiencing humiliation, insults, and all sorts of ordeals, she kneeled down. Instead of crying, she fought her way through. The House of Mammon was supposed to collapse. That was reasonable. But she distorted that reason. Instead of it collapsing, it was revived. They found the gold mine. For the first time, she smiled brightly in front of the other spirits. A house full of ashes, Kaiwan, the demon of distortion. They stopped walking. The dim light that showed within the darkness disappeared. Yongho couldn't interpret that image, but he was able to assume she was the only one that knew the arena's location. She wasn't able to return from that place, and after the House of Mammon barely managed to be revived, it seemed like it was going to collapse once again. The light disappeared. Darkness filled the place. Yongho closed his eyes. His head was hurting. It felt like he drank a lot the night before and was experiencing a hangover. Ouch, Yongho said it without any emotion and blinked his eyes. He was thirsty. He was in the cozy demon's bedroom that Eligor made in a hurry. The ceiling was the same as the other rooms, but the bed that was made out of straw gave off the familiar smell. Yongho closed his eyes again. It wasn't asleep, he tried to remember, but it wasn't easy. The only thing he could remember was the gray hair and the vicious eyes. The owner from 3 generations ago. Yongho sat up. He inspected Kaiwan's ring that was on his left hand. There was nothing else he could remember. Water. Thankfully, there was a water jug next to the bed. After taking several sips, Yongho stood up from his seat. How long have I been asleep for? You've been asleep for 10 hours. The spirit of the dungeon answered right away. Instead of asking again, he waved his finger and displayed the map of the dungeon in the air. Eligor was working together with the goblins, and Catalina was in her room, just like Yongho. It seemed like she was still unconscious. The spirit, Catalina, is in good condition. You don't have to worry. It was as if they read his mind, because the spirit of the dungeon whispered to him. After thanking them for worrying about him, he disconnected with them. It was good that he slept for so long because his body was filled with mana. It increased. His mana became stronger. It wasn't because he obtained the orc spirit. Catalina became stronger. That affected Yong-ho as well. If the owner grows stronger, the dungeon grows stronger as well. When the dungeon grows, the owner grows as well. Spirits that are directly commanded by the owner belong to the dungeon. Their body, heart, and soul all belong to the dungeon and the owner. That's why they were the same as the dungeon. If the owner becomes stronger, those spirits become stronger as well. If those spirits become stronger, the owner becomes stronger too. Although the effectiveness wasn't as big as the relationship between the dungeon and its owner, it wasn't small. Either Yong-ho gulped. He couldn't check the result of Catalina's development. How much stronger did she get? What kind of route opened up? Yong-ho didn't wait any longer. He headed to her bedroom. He walked through the throne room and headed towards Catalina's bedroom. Catalina, him coming in. Of course she didn't answer. Yong-ho hesitated for a moment and opened the bedroom door. Her bedroom was just as small as his, and as soon as he opened the door, he saw Catalina wrapped up in her cloak on top of a pile of straw. Instead of entering her room, he used the power of evolution and observed Catalina. Name: Catalina. F. Race: Hybrid, Succubus. Dark Elf class: Spirit, mid-rank. Attributes: Wind level 1. Darkness level 1. Name: Stats: Charm main. Stats: Charm mainer. Agility Courage. Development rate: 010. Charm level 1. 3. 5. Agility level 3-4. Mana level 135. Courage level 235. Attribute: Boost level 03. 5. Possible development race: Shadow Elf, a Dark Succubus, Shadow Runner. A lot of things changed. The word that notified that Catalina was a mix between a succubus and a dark elf disappeared. Her attribute level appeared and it became more concise. The word hybrid disappeared from the possible routes. A hybrid demon, Catalina still had the opportunity to choose between the elf and succubus route. However, the current Catalina wasn't an elf or succubus, but was a different breed. The new route, Shadow Runner, was probably a new advancement. Yong-ho quickly approached Catalina and unwrapped her cloak. She was still wearing the gear from before, and there wasn't a big difference physically. Does her body look better? Yong-ho looked at a specific part of Catalina's body without knowing, and after covering her with the cloak again, he looked at her head. Her horn definitely grew. It was a bit longer and thicker. The succubus-related stat increased as well, even though it hasn't been developed. It's too soon to come to a conclusion, but it's a good result. Yong-ho released a sigh of relief and collapsed to the floor. He looked at Catalina, who was peacefully sleeping, and cautiously extended his hand and patted her head. He stood up and walked out of her room. "I've waited for you to wake up, sir." As soon as he walked out, Eligor spoke while showing respect. Yong-ho was about to yell because he was startled, but after calming himself down, he closed the bedroom door. The spirit of the dungeon probably notified Eligor that he was awake. His issue regarding Catalina was resolved. Now it was time to resolve the other issues. Eligor, gather the spirits. There's something I need to tell them. He was sure that Forrest was going to attack again within a couple of days, so he had to figure out how to stop him. Eligor assumed that Yong-ho was going to talk about strengthening the traps. But Yong-ho didn't talk about it. He mentioned something that Eligor didn't expect. Let's reclaim the gold mine as soon as possible. With their current funds, they won't be able to defend the dungeon. In that case, he had to gamble. By using the funds that are in the mine, he could find a way to defend the dungeon. Eligor looked at Yong-ho with a blank expression. Yong-ho didn't look at Eligor. "Understood, sir." "He'll gather the spirits," Eligor answered in a dignified manner and headed towards the throne room. Yong-ho was alone once again, and he looked at Kaiwan's ring. "I won't give up easily." Yong-ho sat on the throne, which was proof that he was the owner of the dungeon. He waited for the spirits to arrive. Kaiwan 1 end. Chapter 29. Kaiwan 2:9. Chun Yong Ho, Man Ni says, 4M, Brace, half human, half demon. Class, Demon. Attributes is Fire level 1. Darkness level 0 to development rate, 1000 Xeno. After sitting on the throne, Yong Ho looked at the power of evolution that he used on himself and then remained quiet. Catalina wasn't the only one whose development rate was full. Yong Ho was also in a situation where he could use this power. When you think about it, it was obvious. After the first development till now, it was a short period, but he fought in many battles. He defeated the salamander that was guarding the armory and killed 10 of the crazy ants and slimes. He of course fought against orcs and even obtained their spirit, so it would be odd for his development rate not to be filled up. It did change. Yong Ho focused on the list of development routes. Strength and stamina were automatically level 1 since he's never developed them before. And since mana was developed once, the level was now at 2. The stars represent the potential power of the power of evolution, and he was able to see that it increased by a small amount. The reason why the level of strength and stamina increased is because my body became that much stronger. Then, did absorbing the spirit cause the mana to increase? Yong Ho thought about Catalina. Before her first evolution, agility and courage were the only ones that had a level. After awakening as a demon, Yong Ho's body was getting stronger day by day. If his body continued getting stronger, then his strength and stamina level will most likely continue leveling up. The power of evolution can't be developed through normal methods since it opens up potential power. Even if Yong Ho didn't evolve agility, if it was Catalina, her agility would have been at the level it is now someday. But the development of a hybrid was different. The power of evolution manifested the succubus blood and the dark elf blood in a different way. It was the same idea as John and Ron getting a horn. Yong Ho focused on himself again, to see which category he was going to evolve. He thought for a long time. When he saw that the level of strength and stamina increased to 1, he had made up his mind, he'll put it all into mana. Yong Ho wasn't in the situation where he could idly stand by and contemplate on it. If a fight broke out, he would have to use Aemon and stand on the front line. If he chose to develop strength, stamina, or agility, then his close combat skills will most likely improve as well. But increasing his mana was more important. Currently, Yong Ho's combat style was delivering a fatal blow. Increasing the mana will double Aemon's strength. In that case, it'll strengthen that blow. He also needed mana to evolve the spirits. Building new facilities within the dungeon and rebuilding the old path used up a lot of mana. That's why he chose mana. Developing the other routes was a luxury Yong Ho didn't waste any time. As soon as he made his decision, he activated the power of evolution. He felt both pleasure and pain. Yong Ho roared in pain and joy. It broke the frame. It's to expand the field. The capacity that held Yong Ho's mana changed. Yong Ho's spirit grew, and a lot more mana was now contained within it. He lost track of time again. The spirit of the dungeon was the one that notified him that the development process had ended. Sir, your maximum amount of mana has increased greatly. The dungeon's daily production volume has increased from 80 to 110. Your mana recovery rate is 2 times faster than usual. It's just as the spirit of the dungeon said. Green flames rose out of his eyes, and he closed them to feel it. His mana became stronger. He felt that his mana was a lot stronger when compared to the time he absorbed the orc spirit. Yong Ho took a deep breath, and when he opened his eyes, he activated the power of evolution once again. He didn't use it on himself, but on Aemon, who was currently sitting on his lap. Name: Aemon, race class, A class A to class attribute, fire level. Level, development rate, 500. There was still a lot of question marks. I got a lot stronger compared to when I first got it. Amon stayed quiet ever since Yong Ho first obtained him, and as he looked down on it, he calmed his bitter feeling. If Aemon wanted someone stronger, then he could give it to him. Yong Ho wasn't satisfied in his current condition, but having a development rate of 5 is too low. During that time, Yong Ho maximized his development rate twice, but all he could do was complain. On the other hand, it meant that Aemon was that strong of a demon. After he was done thinking about himself and Aemon, Yong Ho deactivated the power of evolution. He sat down on the throne and raised his head. He saw Catalina and Eligor. Yong Ho gave a dumb reaction without knowing and fixed his posture. All the spirits in the dungeon were gathered around the throne. It's been an hour and 10 minutes since you sat on the throne, sir. The spirits have been on standby for about an hour. It seemed like the trance state he was in during the development process was a lot longer than he expected. Yong-ho released a soft cough to hide his embarrassment. Then Eligor, who was standing in front of the throne, spoke as if he was moved. "Oh, sir." His eyes were filled with tears and looked like they were going to roll down at any moment. On top of that, the way the other spirits were looking at him was quite spirited. The Goblin Ranger's shining eyes were filled with envy and respect. The kobold looked like they were ready to praise him. The treant and the salamander expressed their admiration through small movements. It was an obvious reaction, since they saw how his mana grew through the power of evolution. The way the spirits looked at him was burdening. So Yong-ho coughed again and rolled his eyes. But after seeing Skull's blank expression, he felt an odd calmness. Yong-ho looked back at the spirits. Catalina was standing between Skull and Eligor and was looking at Yong-ho with a flushed expression. As expected, her two long ears were fluttering like wings. On top of that, her tail was wagging like windshield wipers, which resembled a dog. "Wait, a tail." He yelled out what was on his mind. When Yong-ho quickly got up from his seat, Catalina looked at him with a shocked look and started blinking her eyes. She bit her lips and managed to speak. When I woke up, a tail appeared. A tail was one of the physical characteristics a typical demon had, and it was shaped like a sharp trident. Yong-ho looked at the black, glossy tail and asked Eligor instead of Catalina, "Does a succubus have a tail?" "They do. High-ranked ones have wings as well." When Eligor answered right away, Yong-ho looked at Catalina again. Catalina quickly waved her hand and answered, "I don't have wings, just a tail." The development of a hybrid. Before, Catalina was more of a dark elf than a succubus. However, through the development to a hybrid, the blood of the succubus that was asleep awoke. Her new tail was proof of that. "Are you okay? You're not hurt or feel anything weird?" Yong-ho asked with a serious face. Catalina answered while smiling brightly, "No, sir. Actually, I feel pretty refreshed. It's like I've been reborn. I think my mana has gotten stronger as well." It didn't look like she was lying since her ears and tail were moving around energetically. Yong-ho released a sigh of relief. Instead of looking at the soldier that couldn't really lie, he looked at the other spirits. "I'm sorry for making you wait so long. Let's get down to business." Yong-ho started talking. It was about his plans on how to acquire the mine. As usual, Yong-ho didn't say much and went straight to the point and started the next task. It was promoting the spirits' development. Since most of the spirits in the House of Mammon were low-ranked spirits, it didn't take them long to fill their development rate. Yong-ho first evolved the kobold's agility. Like when he evolved Yon's agility, their arms and legs became longer, but they didn't get a horn like the goblins. Kobold's eyes widened because of how long their arms and legs became, and his target was John and Ron. Yong-ho promoted John and Ron to hobgoblins. After becoming a hobgoblin, John and Ron's outer appearance changed a lot. They became a lot taller, and the muscles in their bodies became larger and firmer. Their hazy eyes were now sparkling. The other spirits still lacked in their development rate, and Eligor was among them. Other than going on hunts, he had no experience in actual battles, so it was taking him a lot longer to fill his development rate. But it was a relief that he was able to fill it by working on the dungeon and doing other miscellaneous work. After completing their development, Yong-ho commanded to Eligor that he was going to take the spirits to the armory. It was to prepare for the next task, and about 30 minutes later, Eligor brought the spirits with him and looked at Yong-ho with a worried expression. "You've continuously used the power of evolution. Will you be okay?" "We don't have that much time." Yong-ho smirked and looked at the weapons that were placed on top of the dungeon shop's cognitive magic circle. After reclaiming the armory, they couldn't use a majority of the weapons, so it was disappointing, but they didn't have a choice. They were short on money. "Even if we fail on taking back the mine, we'll be able to stack up a good amount of the development rate. Eligor, I want you to continue working on the dungeon. In case of an emergency." Eligor displayed a warm smile after hearing Yong-ho's request. "It's a good plan, sir. There's a lot of spaces in the House of Mammon. Might as well put them to good use." Yong-ho smiled, and Eligor nodded his head. He wasn't going to insult the previous owners at all. But Eligor was about to confirm Yong-ho was different from them. Even in situations where many would be given up, Yong-ho didn't lose his smile. Instead of giving up and being frustrated by it, he found ways to resolve it. "I'll be back. Start on the construction." "As you wish, Sir Eligor," along with the other spirits, showed their respect. Yong-ho closed his eyes without any delay. He connected to the dungeon shop's virtual space. Chapter 30. Kaiwan 3. Like always, a beautiful woman with red hair was standing in the middle of the white space. Yong-ho was worried that another employee would be standing there, or a dealer that couldn't talk. He released a sigh of relief. Right now, Yong-ho needed someone he could negotiate with. Citri was a member of the dungeon shop, and with a bright smile, she slightly bowed her head. As she stood there beautifully, she spoke as if she was whispering, "It's nice to see you again like this, valuable customer. Nice to see you again too." Yong-ho purposely answered with ease and took a deep breath. It's either because he's seen Catalina so often, or he was in a hurry, but seeing Citri wasn't as uncomfortable as before. Yong-ho approached Citri. After stopping at a good distance, he spoke jokingly. "It's safe to assume that you're fully responsible for the House of Mammon, right? It's coincidence that I happen to have spare time whenever you visit. In your world, you would call this situation fate." "Correct," Citri answered with ease this time as well. She was definitely dangerous. Her small movements and voice had the power to put one in a daze. Instead of saying another joke, Yong-ho looked straight into Citri's eyes. All he did was look into her eyes, but it felt like he was being bewitched. Maybe Citri was a succubus. Citri smiled again. "Valuable customer. What kind of trade are you here to do today? Are you here to purchase another spirit or daily necessities?" The dungeon shop also provides equipment to install new traps, but he wasn't here for any of those. Yong-ho took his time in answering, "I would like to sell before purchasing." "Are you speaking of the items from the House of Mammon?" "Yes, they're ordinary weapons." After answering, Yong-ho waved his finger in the air. He used the same method as when he was in the dungeon, and a window of light appeared in the air. The window of light was divided into many parts, making it look like a shopping catalogue, and inside them were different weapons. They were the weapons from the armory that was sitting on the magic circle that was located next to the throne. "The weapons are in good quality. I'll take a look." When Citri extended her hand out towards the window, some of the weapons that were displayed materialized. Citri softly grabbed the axe where the handle was the only part that was sticking out of the window, and pulled out the axe as if she was unsheathing a sword. It was a battle axe that was so large that it seemed like it would be hard for Citri to wield it with her thin arm. However, she started spinning it as if she was holding a toy. After raising it up to her face, she opened her narrow eyes and observed the axe. She spoke in a sort of bitter tone. Kaiwan Citrus' eyes remained on the sentence, which was written above the wolf that was biting the moon. Yong-ho asked without realizing, "Did you know her?" Instead of answering right away, she stayed quiet for a moment. After holding the axe by the edge of the handle, she spoke while looking afar, making it look like she was thinking about something. She was a fierce and cute child. She didn't like losing to anyone and acted like she was strong. However, she was a child that felt a lot of loneliness. If I were to compare this to your world again, right, she was like a wild cat. A light smile appeared on her face after she finished talking. It was soft and peaceful like always, but there was a mix of sadness. A wild cat, a witch with gray hair and a ferocious face. Did Citri work with the House of Mammon when Kaiwan was the owner 3 generations ago? Was she perhaps in charge of the House of Mammon during that time? He was curious, but he didn't ask. Yong-ho focused on the words that Citri used to describe Kaiwan. A fierce and cute child. Kaiwan was the owner decades ago. That also meant that Citri has been alive for at least several decades. Right now, Citri described Kaiwan as a child. Oftentimes, there are high-ranked spirits that have eternal youth. He remembered what Catalina said. Then is Citri really an important figure, like she mentioned before? Important enough to not age? Citri looked at Yong-ho again. A relaxed expression appeared on her face, as if she had said everything that was on her mind. They're all good weapons. However, there isn't any magic on them also. I'm not sure if you know this, but the items that are sold to the dungeon shops are usually sold cheaper if you were to purchase them as used items. What are you planning on purchasing with the money you obtained by selling these? Yong-ho understood it as bargaining rather than meddling. That's why he answered truthfully. I want some sort of potion that recovers mana in a short period of time. Mana potions always appear in RPGs. Currently, in the House of Mammon, Yong-ho had the strongest firepower. However, Armin consumed a large amount of mana. In order to go against tens, maybe hundreds of those crazy ants, he had to increase the amount of times he could use Armin. You're referring to a mana potion. Citri lightly crossed her arms. This seemed to have interested her because she spoke while looking into his eyes. A mana potion is useless to strong demons. There's a limit to how much mana the potion can recover. However, since you're still growing, it may be a suitable item for you. Yong-ho already confirmed the effects and the limits of a mana potion from Catalina and Eligor. The important thing right now was how many mana potions he was able to purchase from the money he obtained by selling the weapons. Like always, Citri took out a small glass bottle from in between her cleavage. The glass bottle was the same size as a pinky, and it was filled with blue liquid. I'm sure you already know, but a mana potion is very expensive. It's the most important element to us demons. Even though it's useless to high-ranked demons, not all demons are powerful within the demon world. The owners in the empty southern area are probably feeling antsy because they're wanting to obtain more mana potions. The demand rate is higher than the supply rate. It wasn't a good sign. Citri continued talking after slightly tilting her head. This one bottle will be enough to recover all of your mana at once. Also, you won't be able to purchase even one bottle of this with the 20 ordinary weapons that you brought. Citri spoke while looking into his eyes. Yong-ho looked into her eyes as well. If she just wanted to say that he was short on money, there wasn't a reason for her to drag it out like this. Like how Yong-ho assumed earlier, Citri was thinking about bargaining. However, this is between us. He'll be a bit flexible about it. This was the reaction Yong-ho was waiting for. However, what she said totally caught Yong-ho off guard. Please tell you. Yes, tell me why you need the mana potion. What the House of Mammon is going through. If you tell me the truth, then I'll give you 4 bottles. This is a pretty fair deal, don't you think? Citri had a bright smile. Citri was an extremely beautiful woman, and her smile was bright and transparent, which made Yong-ho think that she didn't have any other intentions. Because of that, Yong-ho kept his guard up around Citri. She was definitely showing kindness towards Yong-ho and the House of Mammon. But why? What's the reason behind her kindness? Why did she want to know what was happening in the House of Mammon? At first, he thought maybe Citri was a supporter. It was very possible since she was acting as if she knew about Kaiwan very well. But there was one thing he wasn't sure of. There was nothing more dangerous than quickly jumping to a conclusion and having expectations. However, Yong-ho had to continue using this odd relationship he had with Citri in his plan to acquire the gold mine. Using Citri's kindness was included. Yong-ho closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He made up his mind. He told Citri a short version of everything that happened. He didn't make any poor lies. Citri already knew that he was a half-human and half-demon, and that he had the power of greed, which was one of the 7 deadly sins. Lying to her would only cause trouble. After hearing what Yong-ho said, Citri expressed her emotions, and it was as simple as Yong-ho's. Interesting, Citri smiled. It must have been interesting to her because she lightly exclaimed and then looked at Yong-ho. He saw her true feelings through her red eyes, and knew has seen them once before. Wouldn't most think about giving up or running away if they were in your situation? But that wasn't the case for Yong-ho. Instead of focusing on defense, he explained that this was the time to acquire the mine, and that's why he came to meet her. Yong-ho had sort of a blank expression after hearing what Citri said. The reason was simple. Before hearing it from Citri, he never thought about running away. Citri read his expression. Her smile had a lot more emotion this time. It was quiet, but she even made a sound when she smiled. It must be true. You're definitely a greedy owner. Just letting you know, this is a compliment. Yong-ho didn't know how to respond. Thankfully, Citri quickly resolved the embarrassment he felt, and then she took out 3 more bottles of mana potion from her cleavage. Transactions should always be honest. I'll collect the weapons today and send someone to the House of Mammon to deliver the potions. I'll cheer for you from afar. Citri extended her hand out for a handshake after she finished talking. It was a symbolic gesture that meant that the transaction ended successfully. Yong-ho grabbed her hand. Her hand was so soft that he was afraid it was going to melt. He lightly shook her hand and expressed his gratitude. To avoid saying anything unnecessary, he disconnected from the virtual space like when a character from an online game logs out. Yong-ho himself disappeared from the white virtual space. Citri was the only one left in the white room. Citri looked at the spot that Yong-ho was standing in. Her eyes saw something else instead of the ground. She spoke quietly. Amon, sometimes I feel like you're lazier than I am. Did you find him, or did he call out for you? There was no answer. But Citri was satisfied. With a calm face, she looked up at the white sky that didn't have any wind. Citri's eyes saw something else instead of the sky this time too. There was something over there. A person that remained in Citri's memories. Citri didn't say their name. Like always, she closed her eyes. She lied down on top of a white bed, Kaiwan 3 end.